We go now to Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Welcome back to Face the Nation.
Good morning, Mark.
You just heard the senator from Georgia's comments that high turnout does not prove there is a lack of voter suppression in your state. He pointed to that failed state election board attempt to change election rules as sort of proof of intent there. How do you respond to that, and how do you shore up confidence in your state system?
Well, it's actually very sad to hear what he said, but he's been handpicked by Stacey Abrams when he ran several years ago. And she is actually the founder of the election denial movement. She lost back in 2018 by 55,000 votes. And then when we passed the Election Integrity Act of 2021, she said it was Jim Crow 2.0. But what you've seen in 2022 election and this election is record turnout. We now have photo ID for all forms of voting. People were concerned about signature match. We'd actually been sued by the Democrat Party and the Republican Party questioning, the validity of signature match. So we added that, layered that on top, we added photo ID on top of signature match so that people know we are identifying who those voters are. And then you look at the turnout. We're almost pushing 1.4 million who've already voted early or who we've accepted their absentee ballots. We're probably going to see a record turnout early voting, probably 65, maybe even 70% of all Georgians are going to vote that way. But they have a free will choice on how to vote.
Yeah.
As it relates to the state election board rules, I never supported any of those. I was very vocal about it on day one, and they were ruled unconstitutional. They were shut down. Mm-hmm. But both Republican counties, 2 Republican-controlled boards and 2 election boards actually joined those suits and fought against those state election boards. So it's actually very easy to vote. We have photo ID, we verify citizenship, and we have record turnout.
Well, there's also doubt on the Republican side of the ledger. As you know, your party is not a monolith, and Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is claiming fraud is underway in Whitfield County. She said Dominion voting machines were flipping votes. The county board said there was just one case of a printed ballot not reflecting a voter's selection. And then one of your colleagues said this was just human user error. So as the state's top election official, have you seen any evidence of fraud?
No. And what happened in Whitfield County was the lady thought she had pressed a certain selection, and then when she printed out the ballot, she knew that. She saw that, and so then she made them aware of it, and it got corrected. And then it got blown out of proportion by people that like to use Twitter and other forms of social media. But we're going to respond quickly to these sorts of things in 2024. Because it's not supported by the facts. The equipment's working. We've done all sorts of audits, since the last election and coming up to this election.
Well, it wasn't just some people. It was the elected representative for that district, the Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who said that. But I want to ask you about another thing, because I think it's important to level set for people at home about what is happening with this election. As I understand it, nearly all votes cast in this upcoming election will be recorded on paper. Last night...
Absolutely. 100% will be. And
okay.
It's actually security paper with the state seal on it.
Okay. Important point to establish, because yesterday President Trump said something that implies that because it can take time to tabulate votes, there might be something nefarious here. Take a listen.
We spend all this money on machines, and then they announce, we expect to have the results like 7 days after the election. If you had paper ballots, you get them at 10 o'clock. France went to paper because what we did didn't work.
He's pointing to a lack of paper ballots as a problem here. Is he accurately describing what's happening, and how long will it take to tabulate votes?
In Georgia, 100% of all the votes cast will be on a paper ballot. But actually nationwide, it's going to be over 96 to 97% of all voting in America will be on paper ballots. But we also just put into law this year with SB 189 that all early votes and all early accepted ballots, they all will have to have their results reported by 8 p.m. That's 70, maybe even 75% of all the vote totals will be reported no later than 8 p.m. on election night.
Won't take 7 days to tabulate votes, as he said?
Absolutely not. What we will be waiting for is the overseas ballots that come in no later than Friday, and so those will then be the final numbers. And we'll just see if that makes the difference in the total vote totals. I understand we're very competitive, and that's why we've done everything since day one to make sure we have fast, accurate, and secure elections for all of my voters here in Georgia.
You are a Republican. You have said in the past that you supported Donald Trump in 2016 and in 2020. You famously refused his attempts to overturn election results in your state after the 2020 election. For the record, this year, if the presidential candidate of the other party wins, will you enforce election certification for that winner?
I'm going to make sure that whoever wins this race, that is what gets certified. I'm going to follow the law and follow the Constitution. I'm going to do my job, and that's what the people of Georgia have elected me to do. I represent the voters of Georgia.
So at a rally in August, Donald Trump publicly praised those state Board of Election officials we talked about earlier, 3 of them who were there as his supporters present at the rally. He called them pit bulls fighting for transparency and victory, and he said this.
Your governor, Kemp, and Raffensperger are doing everything possible to make 2024 difficult for Republicans to win. What are they doing? I don't know. They got something in mind.
He's talking about you. This sounds like an attempt to influence election officials. Does this cross a line?
Well, it doesn't influence me because everything we've done from House Bill 316 back in 2019, SB 202 in 2021, and SB 189, everything we've done is to shore up voters' concern, shore up security, but also we are making sure that the lines that Senator Warnock just mentioned, there's state law now, lines have to be shorter than 1 hour on election day, and we track it. And the average wait time in 2022 was actually 3 minutes and sometimes got down to 2 minutes. And even during this early voting period, lines we've been seeing reported at the early vote centers, but lines have been less than an hour. But you also get checked in with the electronic poll pads in less than 2 minutes. I got checked in this past week with my wife. We got checked in less than 47 seconds. I timed it. Pretty amazing.
Secretary Raffensperger will be watching your battleground state closely. Good luck. We turn now to Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Good morning to you, Madam Secretary.
Good morning.
So more than 1 million people have already voted in Michigan. More than 2 million people have requested absentee ballots. I know you cast your own ballot in Detroit, which began voting yesterday. What's the turnout like?
Well, people are energized, and it's been really exciting to see. Now we're over 2 weeks out, just over 2 weeks out, and already, as you mentioned, over 1 million citizens have returned their absentee ballots, which is a great sign for an engaged electorate on both sides of the aisle. And then yesterday, Detroit launched early in-person voting where citizens could come and actually put their ballots into the machine. That's what I did, and I joined close to 2,000 others who did that. And just to give you some comparison, the first day of early in-person voting in Detroit in the August primary, we saw just over 200 people vote. This time we saw 2,000 or close to 2,000, 10 times almost as many. So that shows Detroit citizens are overwhelmingly enthusiastic and engaged. And I'm really grateful for all our partners who've been educating citizens about their rights to vote in these final weeks.
So I want to ask you the same question I asked your colleague from Georgia. If the presidential candidate from the other party wins, will you enforce election certification for that winner if it's potentially Donald Trump?
Yes, without hesitation. I mean, that's my job. That's our job as professional election administrators, to make sure it's easy to vote, hard to cheat, and that we all stand by the will of the people, whatever that may be.
How quickly do you expect to get results?
Well, you know, in 2020, we had the results of our highest turnout election in Michigan history within 24 hours of the polls closing. The unofficial results were completed by 8 p.m. on Wednesday. So we're tracking that again this year. We do have more options to process ballots sooner than Election Day, which is where we were restricted in 2020. So I'm optimistic we could see results even sooner, but I would estimate end of the day on Wednesday as the best guess on how we'll perform. But that said, we will always prioritize accuracy and security over efficiency, understanding how much people will want those results. We're still going to make sure the process is secure and accurate before we put anything out to the public. But that said, we understand people's energy and excitement, and we'll be working hard to ensure those results are ready as soon as possible.
You have been posting on X, formerly known as Twitter, about Elon Musk, who you have accused of intentionally spreading false information about Michigan voters. He is a big supporter of Donald Trump. He owns that platform. Do you believe, what do you believe his intention is here, and how concerned are you that he's misleading voters?
Well, I'll say two things. One, we know adversaries to democracy right now are trying to create chaos and confusion and sow seeds of distrust around our very clear and legitimate and accurate and secure processes of running elections, not just in Michigan, but around the country. So it's incumbent upon all of us to look to trusted sources of information like your local election official and use data to evaluate questions, as opposed to people who are running social media companies with particular agendas and who have a history in amplifying conspiracy theories and false information. So in this moment, it'll be my responsibility, and really everyone's, to look and promote and amplify trusted information about our elections so that people can know both where to go with questions and also have faith in the results. We have set up a website, michigan.gov/electionfacts, which addresses every single question people have raised, and we encourage citizens to go there as opposed to social media for seeking trusted and accurate information about our elections.
You have previously said that Michigan, your state, is being targeted by foreign actors who are trying to disrupt the democratic process. Have you been given concrete evidence or examples by U.S. intelligence about what is happening in your battleground state? Like, what form is it taking?
We know that because our systems are secure, there are foreign bad actors and adversaries to democracy on the global scale who will seek to potentially not hack our systems, but hack voters' minds, to spread falsehoods and misinformation, not just to sow seeds of distrust, but to diminish citizens' confidence in the process and in their own voices. And you see it amplifying now because if there is enough noise, you can cause people to potentially give up and say, I don't know what to believe, I'm disengaging altogether. That's the goal. So we're seeing efforts to amplify misinformation and are prepared to, again, push back with real information. But we need voters to be a part of that as well.
We turn now to the top election officials in two battleground states. Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes joins us from Phoenix, and Secretary of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Al Schmidt joins us from Harrisburg. Welcome, and I appreciate the two of you having this conversation in a bipartisan manner. You are in nonpartisan roles as the top election officials in your states. So, very quick question to both of you. Secretary Fontes first. Will you commit to certifying the election results even if the winner is of the opposite political party?
Yes, without question, that's our duty, and I believe all of my colleagues across the country would do the same.
Secretary Schmidt?
Absolutely, without any hesitation whatsoever.
Now that we've set the table on the very basics here, I want to ask you about some of the recent news. The FBI director said this past week it is incomprehensible and unacceptable that election workers have to be worried about their security. But here we are, and we know the Department of Justice just this past week did indict individuals for making threats to workers in both of your states. Secretary Fontes, one of my CBS colleagues is reporting Maricopa County is significantly increasing security and using drones, using fencing and other measures. I've read news organizations say there are going to be snipers on top of tabulation centers. First of all, is that true? That seems extraordinary. And is that based on specific threat intelligence?
Well, first and foremost, the authority and jurisdiction over the specific tabulation centers are within the counties. My office provides support for all of them, and frankly, we don't get into the specifics when it comes to our safety and security protocols, particularly the source or frequency or nature of any of the specific threats. We are in the kind of a circumstance right now where we're taking whatever precautions are necessary to ensure not just the security of the vote, but of all of our employees, our workers at the polls, at our tabulation centers, and of course, keeping first and foremost in mind the safety and security of our voters.
Can you say at a minimum whether that's increased from what you had to do in 2020?
It's absolutely completely different from 2020. In fact, I remember In 2018, our greatest security threat was a rattlesnake in the parking lot at the Pinnacle Peak precinct. So this is a radically different set of circumstances that we are dealing with, but we are prepared, and we're going to have a secure election.
Secretary Schmidt, what have you had to do in the Commonwealth?
As part of the lessons learned from the experience of 2020, the Shapiro administration organized an election threat task force that I lead, made up of federal, state, and local partners in law enforcement and election administration, so that if any of the ugliness returns that we experienced in 2020, everyone will be ready. In 2020, it was, as Secretary Fontes said, so different than before, and many of us had to scramble to figure out when threats were incoming, where do we refer them to, and all the rest of that. Now we have open lines of communication. Everybody is very clear about what everyone else's responsibilities are, so we'll be prepared should, again, any of that ugliness return.
Secretary Schmidt, you heard me discuss with Senator Vance the specific intelligence that the ODNI and the FBI revealed on Friday about a fake video made by Russia to trick people into believing that ballots were being destroyed in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. How concerned are you about what U.S. intelligence has uncovered, and why do you think they're targeting your state?
Well, I'm very concerned, and it's clear that bad faith foreign actors are seeking to undermine confidence in our election results, and it's no surprise that they've targeted several of the so-called battleground states in Pennsylvania. The video that you're referring to from Bucks County, to anyone who has years of experience in election administration, was conspicuously fake. But if you don't, it's so easy for people to be sort of deceived by others trying to undermine confidence in our system of government. So it's important that our counties remain vigilant, that our Commonwealth remains vigilant, and our federal partners remain vigilant, and to call out any of these sort of efforts to deceive our voters.
Secretary Fontes, another specific warning from U.S. intelligence was some of the mind hacking, the lies being sown in the minds of potential voters. And one specific thing that U.S. intelligence says Russian influence actors are doing are posting allegations about the possibility of illegals, undocumented people voting in this country. You are a border state. We have heard a number of Republican officials, including on this program, try to argue that this is a real concern. Elon Musk is arguing that and amplifying that. What are you doing in Arizona to make sure that non-citizens are not voting in federal elections, which is already against the law?
Well, first and foremost, if and when something like that happens, it is absolutely vanishingly rare. No system is perfect, and I'll admit that right off the top. But the allegation that this is something that might turn an election or is something much bigger than it is, that's the nonsense that we are dealing with. And unfortunately, we still have candidates, elected officials, and folks with large megaphones lying. They are directly lying to the American public, and they are basically playing the role of useful idiots, now we know for sure, to foreign enemies who want to sow distrust in our democracy. They want us to be losing that civic faith that we have in one another as Americans and dividing us further. Again, the source for a lot of this information, and misinformation, I should say, is coming from outside of the United States. It gets amplified by folks in America who are helping those folks. And that's just bad. And it's bad for our democracy. It's bad for business. It's bad for the law and education and science and everything else. So what I encourage folks to do is stop being a Russian puppet. Look to the folks who are actually doing the work. Ask them what's actually happening and go with the truth instead of amplifying lies from foreign adversaries.
Secretary Schmidt, what are you doing to make sure that non-citizens are not able to vote, which is already against the law?
Well, Margaret, I was a Republican election commissioner in Philadelphia County for 10 years. And I assure you, and I assure your viewers, and I assure voters that I care as much about election integrity as anyone possibly could. I investigated hundreds of allegations of voter fraud over that time, whether it involved double voting or allegations of people voting for dead people or non-citizens. And what that research showed time and time again was how incredibly rare it was that it occurred and how easy it is to catch whenever there are incidences of it. There are safeguards in the system from tooth to tail to make sure that, that voter fraud, in the few instances it does occur, is identified, investigated, and responsibly prosecuted.
Secretary Schmidt, on Friday, the Lancaster County District Attorney did report incidents of voter registration fraud among a group of about 2,500 ballots. What can you tell us at this point about how many of those ballots were actually fraudulent and what happens next? Who's behind it?
The county reached out to us right away as soon as they became aware of it for guidance. As far as we can see, the county is pursuing this investigation responsibly. The county hasn't concluded that investigation, so I can't speak to the number of cases yet. We will be relying on them to make that determination and be supportive of our county partners. As part of our commitment, I visited 67 of Pennsylvania's 67 counties to sit down with them and make sure that if there are additional resources they need, additional equipment, or anything else like that, we provide that to them so that we have a free, fair, safe, and secure election in 2024, just as we had in 2020.
And it was notable in my interview with Senator Vance that he said he was confident in Pennsylvania. But when I asked about litigation, he raised the possibility of non-citizen voting and said they would be open to litigation if that were to happen.
Well, the good thing about our judicial system, which is really where our disputes should be settled, is it is always something of a put up or shut up moment when it comes to providing actual evidence of actual problems. And that when people are involved in litigation and lawsuits, they have to present that evidence. And I think that's why time and time again, in many dozens of cases in 2020, every one of those cases upheld that our elections were accurate and that were not susceptible to any sort of widespread voter fraud or anything like that.
Secretary Fontes, 95% of all ballots cast in battleground states will be recorded on paper. However, President Trump said this on Joe Rogan's podcast about a conversation he just had with Elon Musk.
He said to me that unless you have paper ballots, it can never be an honest election. That's a big statement.
It's a big statement.
We should go to paper ballots. You're done by 9 o'clock in the evening, right? Now we have these sophisticated machine. It goes up to heaven. It goes all over the place and down and around. And they say, we'll need 2 weeks to figure out who the hell won the election.
Mr. Secretary, do you want to set the record straight? And how long will it take you in Arizona to know the results?
Well, first, I'm glad that Mr. Trump agrees with the security of Arizona's elections, where we have 100% paper ballots and have had so in Arizona for several decades. Number two, it's going to take us as long as it has always taken us. While we have more voters, and in many cases in counties, a lot more voters, the time that it takes us to process our ballots is based on doing it right the first time, not doing it quickly for news cycles or for the sake of political satisfaction. We will have official results in about 10 to 13 days, but everybody knows that the networks and the newspapers will make their prognostications whenever they see fit based on their math. And that's just the way it works. We're perfectly confident that we're going to have what we need when we need it, which is when it happens, and it will be accurate.
Secretary Schmidt, how quickly will you know the results in Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania is at something of a unique disadvantage in that our counties cannot begin processing mail-in ballot envelopes until 7 a.m. on election morning. Plenty of other states, red and blue alike, allow that process to begin days, if not weeks in advance. But a couple things have changed since 2020. Counties have acquired additional equipment that assist with the processing of those ballots and ballot envelopes. They've a lot more experience than they had in 2020, which is the first time any of us encountered in Pennsylvania mail ballot voting in a large scale. And also the percentage of voters, while it's still widely embraced, the percentage of voters voting by mail has decreased since 2020 during that peak COVID environment. So there are several factors that will, I think, contribute to knowing results earlier, even though the law hasn't changed. But as Secretary Fontes said, it always comes down to, and has always ever come down to, how close an election is before you know who won and who lost.
Exactly. And as our Anthony Salvanto, our CBS Elections and Surveys Director, was telling us, this is a tight one. So we will be watching what's happening in your states very carefully. Thank you for level setting with all of us.